So, continuing our discussion here, we're going to talk about making better slow motion shots. Now, probably the ideal way to do this is if you have access to your footage, you're in the production team. Basically, you want to over crank, you want to shoot more frames than you need, and that way, when you create slow motion shots, you have real slow motion. But sometimes, as post production artists, we aren't involved in the production process, so we don't have any say in how it was shot. We have to fake it. One of the best ways in After Effects to do that is with the time warp effect. So I'm going to apply the time warp effect to this footage here from greenlayers.com. And essentially, we have this speed control. Now, it's a little confusing because the speed control works the opposite as the stretch control we saw in the last movie. So with stretching we saw before, if you take this down to 50%, then the clip goes twice as fast. Here in the time warp effect, if we have a speed value of 50, then the clip is going to go half as slow. I actually think the speed value here is a little bit more intuitive. That makes sense to me that if the speed is at 50%, then it's going to play half the speed. If you wanted to speed this clip up, you would take it to something over 100. But here's the magic of the time warp effect. Now, to really understand what's going on here, let me actually go out to a couple seconds, maybe 3 or 4 seconds. So we have our subject here, our actor. And if we take the method from pixel motion to whole frames, we see what we saw in the last movie with stretch. So in other words, the frames are duplicated. So we have a real frame and then a copy, and then a real frame and then a copy, a real frame copy, so on and so forth. Now, the next method takes a little longer to render, but it's a little bit smoother. It's called frame mix. And what that does is and you can see this here, it blends the opacity of the two frames together. So every frame is essentially a real frame, but what it's doing is it's taking the two frames that have been stretched apart and fading the opacity between them, so there's a little bit better of a blend. But as you can see here, this doesn't quite work out all that great in every circumstance. So he kind of looks like he has like a weird stutter effect as we kind of scrub through this here. So the best method to slow footage down is to change this method, or actually just leave it at pixel motion, which is the default. And pixel motion really is magic. And what pixel motion tries to do is to simulate a frame in between. So now as you can see, as I'm going from frame to frame here, it looks like we have every single frame. It's actually creating frames from scratch. Because it's actually making frames from scratch, trying to imagine what the in-between frames would be, and you're getting such smooth motion out of it, it does take a while to render. So again, ideally, you'd want to shoot this correctly. You'd want to overcrank the footage when you're shooting it. But if you don't have access to that, and a lot of time you don't, then the time warp effect with the method set to pixel motion is the way to go.